Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/entitled people, where Karens literally think the world revolves around them, and who cares about anyone else? And this episode is another wild one. We've got Karens stealing medical devices, stealing from their children, losing people's children, throwing tantrums in restaurants, and a racist Karen learns a lesson she won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. This happened several years ago. I was a photographer for a major theme park, and I've dealt with my fair share of entitled Karens. But there's only been one time that I've had to call security because of a Karen. I was working with a character one afternoon, and one of the families that stopped by to pay a visit was a family of 3, with mom, dad, and a 5-year-old boy who I'll name Malcolm. Malcolm is strapped to a harness attached to mom's waist to keep him close to mom and dad. Before the session, dad pulls the character attendant and me aside and alerts us that Malcolm was a nonverbal autistic and camera flashes were overstimulating to him. Now, this was a pretty common request, so I adjusted my settings so I wouldn't have to use flash and thanked him for alerting me. Fast forward a bit and it's Malcolm's turn, and he was such a sweetheart. He just wanted to show off the book full of pictures of his favorite dinosaurs, and we all got sad when he had to leave. A few hours later, I was in an area we refer to as backstage, where guests aren't allowed, heading to my break. Now imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I get body slammed by Malcolm. And for the record, I'm a 6-foot-tall, 250-pound man, and he nearly managed to knock me over. The kid is screaming and crying. Fortunately, my manager Oscar was nearby, so I flagged him down, and we immediately call security. We then get Malcolm to a cool air-conditioned place as it's really hot outside, and I looked up pictures of dinosaurs on my phone to show Malcolm. Eventually, he calmed down, and he essentially became my little buddy. About 10 minutes later, Malcolm's reunited with a tearful mom and dad, and this is when we get the full story. Enter the entitled Karen. So mom, dad, and Malcolm were getting ice cream when the entitled Karen approaches. The conversation went roughly as followed. The Karen says, "Excuse me, but why is your son harnessed?" The mom tells her, "Oh, my son is autistic and he will bolt if he's not harnessed. He will literally run anywhere and everywhere." And that's when Karen says, "No, he's not." The mom says, "Excuse me?" Karen then goes on to say, "You are just a bad parent. You're using that as an excuse. I'll have you know my grandson is autistic, and he knows better than to stray from me. And he's about the same age." That's when the mom tells her, "I'm sorry, but everyone's different. My son is incapable of understanding that. It's safer for himself and everyone if he's harnessed." It's at this point, dad comes back with ice cream, and mom turns her attention away to help him. The next thing she knows, the harness goes slack. When she looks up, Malcolm and Karen are gone. It's so packed that day with literally hundreds of people that it's easy to lose track of someone, especially if it's a running child. Also, an important thing to note is that the park has cameras everywhere, so it was easy to get a video of the incident and get a description of the Karen. Security was alerted and Karen was tracked down. She was belligerent, and she tried to slap the security guard who stopped her, stupidly doing that in front of an Orange County sheriff. So she got a lovely court date for assault as a result. Malcolm and his family were given an extra day added to their tickets as an apology for what happened. But they also had one request. They asked to know where I would be the next day so I could take their pictures. The next day, I gave them a full photo shoot, and yes, it was the best day of my entire career. Honestly, guys, nothing is worse than a-hole-ish random strangers trying to force their opinions on parents. Like, could you imagine the mom telling Karen that the reason her son is strapped to her is the fact that he's autistic? And the Karen then having the audacity to go, no, I don't think so. Here, I'll prove it by unstrapping him. Like the fact that Karen totally ignored Malcolm's parents and she unhooked the boy from his mom after being told he has to stay strapped to her is absolutely stupid. Like, so many things could have gone wrong that day. I'm just glad Malcolm ran into OP and he ended up safe that day and Karen was charged in the end. Like, a 5-year-old getting lost in a crowd of people is already freaking terrifying for the parents, but a nonverbal autistic boy getting lost, that would be a nightmare. And this person says what I'm sure a lot of parents in that situation would be thinking. They say, I'm a parent to a special needs child, and they would have had to cuff me too. Okay, so I'm a parent, and when I read some of these stories, I think there's no possible way that someone is that entitled. And then today it happened. I encountered an entitled mom, and now I've been humbled because I realize I was wrong. There are some crazy entitled people out there. So today, I had to go to the grocery store as our family's low on food. It's also warm here, so I wore a tank top and jeans. I'm also a type 1 diabetic, and I wear an insulin pump with a continuous glucose monitor. You can see the monitor on my arm. I'm at the store when my pump starts beeping, alerting me that my insulin's getting low in my pump. So I pull out my pump to silence the alarm. And that's when I hear a kid behind me say, "Mommy, that looks like a cool toy. Can I get it?" I of course ignore it until I hear the woman say, "Excuse me, I need to see your video game. My son wants to know what it is so I can buy it." She says this while tapping my shoulder. I say to her, "Ma'am, I do not have a video game with me. It's my..." And before I can say another word, the Karen says, "Of course you do. I see it in your pocket, right there." That's when I tell her, "Ma'am, you are mistaken. This is a medical device, and I can't..." And I couldn't even finish because she reaches over and she grabs my pump. I then smack her hand, but she has a death grip on my pump and she ends up pulling it out of my body. I then start screaming, telling her that there's a needle at the end of the tubing and she needs to be careful that her kid doesn't get hurt. This is when employees come running into the aisle and they start asking what happened. And that's when Karen has the nerve to say, "This crazy person just pulled this thing out and she tried to stab my kid with the needle on it. I want her arrested." I say, "Actually, that's my insulin pump. You pulled it out of me because you thought it was a video game." So shortening a long story, the woman lies through her teeth, and she insisted that I came after her because I'm crazy and I hate children. The police are called because she wants to press charges on me and have me jailed. The police review the tapes and see that I'm telling the truth and arrest her. I won't let her get away with what she did, and I press charges on her because she needs to be taught a lesson. I did leave without my groceries because my pump is freaking out that my sugar's rapidly rising as I don't have it inserted in my body, giving me a steady stream of insulin. Just typing out this story has me shaking my head because it seems made up. And honestly, if it didn't happen to me, I would question it. Seriously, like, when will people learn not to lie to cops like that, especially in stores where there's cameras all over the place? Like, what a nasty woman she was, trying to turn it around on OP. And to think a person like her has children, guys. I'm always so shocked to hear that grown adults just grab things from others like this, and what makes it worse is in this case, she actually endangered OP's life. And again, she then had the audacity to play victim when she realized what she had done. All I can say is thank goodness OP pressed charges. And guys, if that story made you a little bit angry, oh boy, listen to this next one, where a parent crosses boundaries. So this happened back in the 90s when I was the owner of a comic book store. One afternoon, I was in my store going through inventory when a woman walks in. This was unusual back then because, well, it was. I saw that she did have the precursor to what would become the Karen cut, and the woman was wearing large rimmed glasses and a skirt that was in style back then. I figured she might be looking for a gift for her son, so I asked if I could help. She then asked if I bought boxes of comics. I told her usually not, unless there was something I could use, but I would have to take a look. So we go to her car and we bring in a couple of long boxes. These boxes hold about 300 unbagged/boarded books or 250 boarded, and I went through them. They were all bagged and seemed to be in great shape. They were the popular comics at the time: X-Men, Hulk, Ghost Rider. I thought I could sell them, and I offered her $100 for all of them, and she accepted. She then left, and I put the boxes on the table to price them out and sort them out. About 20 minutes later, a kid about 12 years old walks in, and he looks at the books on the wall, and he notices the boxes. He then asked if they were for sale, and I said yes, but they weren't priced out yet, so if there's something he wanted, I would give him the price. And then he starts looking through them. After a few seconds, he has a strange look on his face, and I asked him if something was wrong. And I will never forget what the kid says. He says, "These are my comics." That's when I say, "What?" And he repeats it. I then asked him if he could verify it, and he said he had a code written on every board, that he could recite it. I then pulled out 5 books at random, and he nailed every code. I then asked him to describe his mom, and he described the woman that sold me the books. I just told the boy to not worry because he'll get them back. I then asked for the phone number and I called it, placed it on speaker, and waited. After a few seconds, the woman answers and I responded, "Mrs. Karen, your son is here and informs me that the books you sold me did not belong to you. Will you please come down and give me back the 100 so he can have his books back because I do not buy stolen merchandise?" And Karen's response was to lose it. She starts screaming into the phone. She says, "My son is in your effing store. Tell him to get the F out and never go back there again." She then shrieks that if he ever comes in here again, she'll have me arrested. And the kid was in tears at this point. All he muttered was, "Mom, you stole my books." She then continues her rant and says, "I don't want that crap in my house. Get out right now. I'm so mad that you even went there. You're grounded." She then slams the phone down. I just let the kid sit while I processed what happened. While this is going on, another kid and his mom saw what happened, and they said hello and saw he was crying. They knew him, and they knew the kid's mother and asked what happened, and the kid told her. She was disgusted, and she said she'll take him home and have a few words with his mom. Before he left, I asked him what he wanted to do, and he said, "Do whatever it takes." I asked, "Even call the police?" and he said yes. I then said that I'm gonna try one more thing before that. About 7:30 that night, I called the number, and I got the father. I explained what happened that afternoon, and the only thing he said was, "She did what?" I repeated, and again he said the same. And then Karen realized who he was talking to, and she starts screaming again, yelling that I'm getting arrested for harassing them. The father then said for her to shut up. He then thanked me and said he would handle it, and then asked what time I closed. About 15 minutes later, I see the kid and his father, with Karen being dragged along, and she's shrieking so loud that dogs 3 counties away from us had bleeding ears. He then drags her in, and he tells her to give me back the $100. She yells that she doesn't want that crap in her house and she won't do it, that she's gonna have me arrested for selling this garbage to children, and how could they even let me open in this town? She hated Superman and baseball cards. She then breaks away from the father and she starts kicking my showcase and knocking things over in the store. He manages to grab her collar and yank her back before she caused any more damage. She then tried to shove my computer off the counter, but I managed to stop her. The father gave me back what I paid, plus a little extra for all the BS, and apologized. Karen said when he's at work and the son's at school, that she'll just set them on fire. The father said no, that he's bringing them to his business and he would keep them safe from her. He also said that he would come with the kid in the future. Now, I found out the aftermath 10 years later, secondhand, so I can't verify. Karen basically destroyed the relationship and she never apologized. After the kid graduated, he joined the army, married, and had a kid. He doesn't see her often, but allows contact when the father's there. I can't believe this thing happened all over comic books. Now, there are those who are probably asking, why didn't I ask her if they were hers? I didn't think of it at the time, but since then, when anyone came in to sell comic books, I would ask, are they yours? And in the 10 years after that, I only had one say they weren't. Which leads me to the second Karen of the story. So at a flea market that I used to do, a woman walked to my booth, and she asked if I bought comics. I asked her, are they yours? The woman then said no. I then asked if she had permission to sell them, and again she said no. I then asked her, why do you want to sell them? And her reason is, my son is too old to be reading comic books. So I went through his house and I'm doing him a favor. He's 37. I said to her, ma'am, you went through your son's home and you're selling his comics without his permission? She said yes. I then told her that I don't buy stolen comics. And I also said that I'm 49 at the time, and I read comics. That's when a guy who's looking through my book said, ma'am, I'm 72 and I read comics. She then huffed that we were immature idiots and then walked off. That's when the old guy said, at least I'm not being an a-hole and stealing my kids' books and selling them. Have a nice day. And that is the end. Yeah, it's no surprise that the son cut contact with the mom after that. And OP's such a good person for helping the boy get his comics back that day, because he could have easily not cared and kept the $100 and made money off reselling them. And seriously, I always find it so funny when people put an age limit on things. My son is 37 and he shouldn't be reading comics. So I took the liberty of going through his home when he's not there, and I'm trying to sell all of his comics. Like, how does that second Karen think it's gonna end? Like, does she think her son will be happy about what she did? Like, that's a great way to destroy a relationship with your kids. Get rid of their own personal belongings, which you think they shouldn't have. Okay, so I was just reminiscing about the absurdity of the situation that happened almost 2 years ago, and I've decided it's too good not to share. I'll be honest, it involves a lot of legal stuff that I'm not sure I'm talking about 100% correctly, but I can assure you that this story is true, as is the end result. And this might be a long one, so buckle up. So for context, my mom's a traveling healthcare worker, and we're from the US. Usually, her contracts last anywhere from 8 weeks to 9 months, and she's worked all around the States. This results in a lot of airline miles that she likes to gift me, so I can visit her when she's on contract. That way, I get a nice vacation, she gets to see me, and I get to see her. It's a win-win-win situation. With that said, 2 years ago, my mom scores her first overseas contract on a tropical island for 6 months, from June to the end of November. I had just gotten a crappy job in my hometown to start saving for whatever my next step was. 3 months in, my mom realized the downside to being on a very small island where travel was a pain in the butt is she was very lonely. This prompted a very bashful phone call in which she asked if I wanted to take a break from working to come stay with her for a while. I jumped at the opportunity and we make arrangements for me to stay with her for the last few months of her contract. All of this context comes to the main character, another US-based traveler, who was my mother's coworker, who we'll call Mary. Now, Mary, to put it bluntly, was racist as heck. She wasn't enjoying getting paid to work on an island with crystal blue water and white sand beaches. Why? Because she failed to realize that she wouldn't be treating white resort goers. No. It turns out the people who tend to be treated at the local hospital were the native islanders. You know, the people of color. The woman was so livid about having to go to a grocery shop surrounded by people of color. And I want to note, that's not what she called them. What she called them starts with an N and ends with an R. And it didn't matter that she could go to the beach every day after work, and she was lodged in a multi-million-dollar vacation home on one of the highest points on the island with a gorgeous view. No, she was way too busy recoiling at the sight of melanin. So yeah, she hated being there and she wanted nothing more than to leave. She latched onto my mom for company, and my mom reluctantly obliged her for the time, due to the aforementioned loneliness. The main conflict of this story comes when my mom's contract began to reach its end, while Mary still had a month to go. Mary fought tooth and nail to renegotiate an early end of her contract, but she was denied. So what does she do? The woman decides that she'll just leave, like she packs up all of her stuff and she departs to the US anyway. Which is no biggie, right? She doesn't get her last remaining paychecks. Wrong, because here comes the beauty of contracts. You see, the contract that she agreed to comped her lodging on the condition that she fulfill her employment duties. And since she very clearly had no intention to, the contract was therefore voided, and the compensation for her lodging was promptly retracted. She was now on the hook to pay back this country's health ministry for the several months of rent they had paid to house her in that gorgeous vacation home with a beautiful view. Now, I'm not sure how much it would have been, but I'm guessing tens of thousands at the very least. Mary was now not only a crap employee in the country, but she was a literal fugitive. But here's the thing, she figured that they could only arrest and charge her if she ever stepped foot back on their soil, so she wasn't really concerned. And she was mostly right. But that wasn't the only thing this country's government could do. They then proceeded to ring up the good old US government and notify them of the charges, and let them take it from there. They couldn't have her extradited, but they could ask the US to flag her passport until she paid them or faced charges. So the US government said, sure buddy, we'll do it. And they did. So in the end, Mary can't leave the US anymore. She can't even go to Canada. She tried to join her friends on a vacation to Mexico, but she wasn't allowed to cross the border. So if you ever think that you screwed up a job really badly, just remember that you at least aren't an international criminal who can no longer leave the country. And honestly, I'm not even sure why her racist butt even wanted to go to Mexico. I heard there's a lot of Mexican people down there. Holy moly, was that story ever satisfying. Racist Karen gets the karma she deserves. And you gotta wonder if Mary ever paid or is planning to pay what she's owed, or if her passport is still flagged. And this person comments, imagine being so racist that a mere month of paradise can't tempt you, unless there's someone who barely tolerates you but sorta kinda looks like you is there. I'm a 20-year-old female and I have a disorder called epilepsy, where I get seizures quite often. I was diagnosed at the age of 12, and I've had problems with it since. It's different kinds of seizures in weird places, like the shower, in the middle of class, etc. So with that said, here's the backstory. I grew up in a small village that was a very popular place for tourists. When I was about 15 or 16 years old during my summer break, I decided to take a job to see what it's actually like to work. I got a job at a local restaurant because my dad knows the owner. They sold pretty simple foods there that I could make while working for them. The staff there were really nice to me, and we all did a little bit of everything because of the small amount of workers. Sometimes I was the chef, and then a few hours later, I'd be taking orders or making drinks, etc. Again, a little bit of everything. This restaurant was pretty packed during the summer, and almost every table would be taken for at least 4 to 5 hours straight, so we had a lot to do when it came to food and serving it. My boss was very nice to me since she knew my dad and my diagnosis. So with that, here's the actual story. One day, a family of 6 walks in when the entire restaurant was packed with people. After about 7 minutes of me serving food and taking orders, I hear a super quiet clearing of the throat, and I turned around to see where it came from. It was from the family, who were now standing in front of the exit door, blocking it. I then take a deep breath, and I walked up to them with a smile on my face. I say, "Hello, ma'am, can I..." And that's when Karen rudely interrupts me, and she says, "Oh my gosh, finally! You are so stupidly slow here today." Now at first I was shocked, but I asked her if she needs help with anything, to which she responds, "Well, duh. Do you think we're standing in this packed restaurant for fun? Me and my family need a table pronto, so we can sit down and get some food. We've had a very long walk and we need to rest, especially my kids." She then points to her kids, who look to be around 10 to 15 years old, and they're looking at their phones, not giving a single care about what's happening. And she says, "Well..." At this point, Karen's right in my face. She's beet red, looking like she's going to murder me. To this day, I still don't understand why she got so aggressive about a table. I backed away a few steps, and I say, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're packed at the moment. I can't give you a table right now. If you want, you can wait outside the restaurant until I can." Karen became even more red at this point, and she screams, "Let me see your manager. You are being so rude." I started panicking, but as she said that, I turned around looking for my boss, who was currently washing dishes in the back. So I ran to her and explained the situation. She told me to stay here and she would handle Karen while I took the dishes. After a few minutes of washing, my head starts to hurt, and I was feeling like I need to sit down or I'd collapse at any moment. I knew what was happening as I've had seizures before. I then took out my phone, messaged my dad I was having a seizure, and that I needed help because it was getting worse. My dad then sent me a message saying he informed my boss and he was on the way to pick me up. My boss soon came back and she told me that I could go home and she would handle my work today. When my dad arrived, he took my hand for support and we started walking towards the exit, where Karen and her family were still standing, with Karen digging daggers towards my dad now. She then decides to make the most stupid decision that I've ever heard or seen. Karen walks up to my dad and she starts yelling in his face. She screams, "What are you doing? Why are you dragging her out of the restaurant? She's supposed to be working to get my family a table. Why are you taking her out of here?" My boss then walks up to her and says, "Ma'am, even though this is none of your business, I've allowed her to leave because my employee's having a seizure. She needs to go home for some rest." My dad just ignored the argument and he kept walking towards the exit. Then, without any kind of notice, this woman just grabs me and she starts shaking me to prove I wasn't having a seizure. At this point, my dad became furious and he pushes her back, hiding me behind him out of Karen's reach. He then screams at her, "Don't you ever touch my daughter again. I will have you effing arrested so fast." It became completely quiet and Karen's face was as white as a ghost because she'd realized what she had done. My dad then walked out with me in his arms since I was completely helpless now with how long my seizure had been going on for. A few days later, my boss told me that Karen left a horrible review and her family have now been banned from the place. If they try to come close, my boss will call the cops on them. And I can understand why, because what Karen had done could actually land her in jail. She attacked a minor with a disability. Yeah, the post ends right there, but the stuff that people do sometimes, guys, literally never ceases to amaze me. Like shaking somebody to prove they aren't having a seizure. Like, are you kidding me, Karen? Like, I just find it mind-boggling that her first thought was to shake OP to see if the seizure is real. And if I were the dad, I would have gotten the cops involved for sure, because we can all agree that she needs to be taught a lesson, right? And what makes the situation even worse is she left a bad review of the restaurant. Like, I wonder what that review even said. Like, horrible service, staff members refused to serve me, and one even faked a seizure to get out of working. Some entitled people, I tell you. And guys, that brings us to another end of our /entitled people. I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's another episode of Entitled People where Karens are going absolutely insane and getting arrested. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.